Hi, this is Assessment1 for Issues Management in Strategic Communications. My name is NigelHedges and my student ID is 17284906. The issue that I have decided to talk about is the Kaspersky Lab ban in the United States. It's actually an issue come crisis, and I'll explain this more in the following slides. The issue turned crisis is essentially the revelation that Kaspersky Labs antivirus software was allegedly being used for purposes beyond their purpose of scanning for viruses in files and was being used to scan for US government classified documents, essentially spying for intel. And it happened because there's always been a lingering concern that the US election was impaired or influenced, if you like, by Russian actors. In the geopolitical landscape that is the US, I'm not sure if this could have been avoided. The intelligence bureaus of the USA were inevitably going to look at any and all methods that could have been used in the US election. For example, a prime suspect was always going to be that Russian-made software on US government computers was a risk. So there are two issues here. One is of the corporate survivability of Kaspersky Lab in the face of these geopolitical pressures, and then there's the second one, which is an issue of national security for the United States. The issue that I'm focusing on, what resonated with me, is the first one, the corporate survivability, or the issue as it is seen by Kaspersky Labs. Because I was actually one of the technical directors for the company in question for the Australian and New Zealand territory, looking after the technical interests and also a media representative from 2009 to 2012. So it's got a bit of personal meaning to me. One of the questions I get asked in the industry and personally is, hey, aren't you Russians the guys who made the viruses? And the truth is that there's plenty of reports, like in February the 3rd, 2010, a report by Sophos that said it was entitled "The Top 10 Malware Hosting Countries Revealed," where it clearly shows the US as the #1 hosting country for malware, almost 3 times as its nearest competitor, being Russia, followed closely by China. So over the years, the US have often been the #1 producer of malware than not, with China and Russia fighting for silver and bronze. So what else do we know? Well, in June, there was an article bubbling up at the Register, which is a UK information technology news site, about a soft raid by the FBI of Kaspersky Labs' US homes. And by July, a US congressman had approached the House of Representatives around his suspicions that Kaspersky Lab had ties to the Kremlin. So the viability of Kaspersky Labs as a solution to the cybersecurity threat faced in the Western world context has been an issue in the UK and the US since 2000. But it was really only recently that it bubbled up and heated up with that congressman making that notification, the FBI activity, when it was publicly communicated that the US government was urging US corporations, enterprises and small business, as well as government agencies, to avoid Kaspersky security products. And so this is an interesting one because it's then become an issue that has turned into a crisis for Kaspersky Lab as an organization. So there's a number of stakeholders and publics involved here. The main ones being the US government and the Trump administration, obviously hot off the press of Russia fiddling with Donald Trump's election. Eugene Kaspersky is a primary stakeholder in Kaspersky Labs. So definitely a lot of high power and high influence effects going on here. Trump with a national world power, and Eugene as a subject matter expert and leader in information security industry. So some fairly big stakeholders there. From the public perspective, you have the current consumer and corporate customers of Kaspersky who would often or would be worried right now as what does this mean for me? Is my stuff safe? What else is Kaspersky doing in terms of the alleged activity? And also there's the future customers, consumer and corporate, people that might have been in a transition stage or looking at moving. They'd also be worried about what it means for them. But also particularly the information security industry itself became a buzz with all of this, and a lot of people have been weighing in, from regular bloggers to people on LinkedIn. There's also the public, which is the US electoral constituency, and the US government agencies, DHS being one of them. And the last public is the employee base itself for Kaspersky Lab, who have felt very personally attacked by all of this. In terms of an organisational response, Eugene was pretty quick to get on the front foot here. He went onto LinkedIn pretty quickly and shored up some industry support for what was going on. The company turned to Facebook to respond to this. And there were several press releases. The notable one was on the 25th of October, when they came back with a preliminary investigation into the software. And then there was the actual proactive reach out to the US Congress to testify. Interestingly enough, what was visible on social media was that Eugene Kaspersky had been proactively reaching out to the US Congress to testify, and got some pretty terse responses back from the US Congress. But then the media painted it out that almost like Eugene had begrudgingly accepted to be hauled in front of the US Congress. So that it was actually the US Congress who had asked him to testify, which is an interesting twist on what actually happened. So there was other exoneration press releases, Kaspersky saying they would never and have never been involved in geopolitical pressures. And there's also a decision to disclose the source code for transparency. And this is actually quite a big one, because the intellectual property of software companies is actually their source code. So disclosing that for transparency reasons is actually pretty big. That would probably be recognized in the industry, maybe not so much in the consumer and media spaces, where it's not quite understood what source code probably actually means, and what that's actually trading on. There was a signed deal to share cyber threat intelligence with Interpol, a further response by the company to give the impression that they are open and wanting to get on with their brand promise. And I can only imagine that Interpol wouldn't have agreed to a PR release like that without being fully behind it. There was further releases, subtle releases of information about the investigations by US, CIA and NSA hackers, and how they themselves had their systems hacked, or they partnered with Israel. So there was a little bit of discrediting happening by Kaspersky back at a bit of a blowback on these parties without being too upfront about it. And the last thing really is they got on with it. They got on with their brand promise, which was protecting and securing the world, which is effectively their corporate objective. So what does this all mean? What is the outcome of all these responses? In truth, it's still unfolding. The revenue impact, or the commercial impact to the organisation, will only really be accessible after the conclusion of December, which is the American financial year quarter one end, and more tellingly will be in September, at the end of September 2018, which is the end of the financial year, looking at the annual results. Another outcome of the responses that has had a effect to rally employees, Kaspersky Labs employees around the world, that has actually had a effect on discrediting the US media and the US government. You've seen some Twitter responses from people within and outside of the US government, but it's fairly limited, and it's been not given a lot of airtime, funnily enough. US bloggers are not buying it, so TomsGuide.com reported that it's business as usual, Kaspersky is still safe to use. And as of the 10th of November, Googling Kaspersky Lab, the first 4 hits are still search engine optimized to look at Kaspersky's solutions, and it was only the 5th and 6th hit that actually started talking about the US ban. Well, was there another way? Looking at a bunch of these effects and thinking of it in terms of their whole reputation, the cycle of maintain, enhance, protect, and utilize. I think Kaspersky have really put a lot of reputation in the bank, so they were able to use what they've delivered on their brand promise over a number of years and all their hard work trying to get into the US market. And I think that that's had an effect of damage control. I certainly don't think they're able to utilize this for a really positive outcome, although in limited sets and certainly in some of the publics, it's had an effect of strengthening their relationship and their reputation with Kaspersky. I think that Eugene's figurehead response and being on the front foot with his customers was actually a good move, and by making continual pulse points around openness and transparency, even though that has some certain risks to the organisation as well, they'll probably be weighed up against the current risk that the US revenue could completely dry up. So they also got on with the objective. So they got on with their brand and said, we're going to continue doing what we say we were going to do. So perhaps the only thing I would have done differently is there was an opportunity to explain that when they made their source code available and transparent for disclosure, what exactly that meant. If there was a way to translate that into a way that multiple publics could understand just the weight behind what that actually meant. That'd be like KFC giving away their recipe. So that was the only thing I would probably change. Any questions regarding this video for Assessment 1, please send to 17284906 at student.latrobe.edu.au or post me on Canvas. Thank you.